I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today, who's Dr. Colman Noctor, who's going to talk to us about information technology, Facebook, and related issues, all relating to mental health. So I'd like you to give him a warm round of applause, please, to welcome him.
Thanks very much. Firstly, thanks for coming out on such an awful night. It's a credit to all, and it's great to see so many numbers here. The reason I'm interested in this topic is, as Carol said, I've studied, my doctoral thesis is around the relationship with young people and online and information around how that affects how we relate to each other. The real reason behind my research is I want to know why someone takes a picture of their lasagna and shares it with over 1,000 people. So it's kind of, it's a real life issue, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. And I suppose what I'm going to try and present today is a bit of a story around what I've found on my journey, both as a psychotherapist working with children and young people, and as my role in the research as well. So it's first, I better tell you about my introduction to the technological seduction. And I call it that because I think it is a technology that is seductive in many, many ways. My daughter was born in 2012 on the 19th of September, and I put my first status update. Now, I firstly want to say I'm not a Neanderthal. I'm not going to start slamming desks and say the internet is bad. I have a smartwatch. I'm a techie. I have Twitter. I have LinkedIn. I have all that stuff. But I suppose I wouldn't have been a very active participant. I was more of a kind of a lurker. I watched people, but I didn't actually contribute to it. But when my daughter was born, I put a status update, just a picture of her, baby Layla, born 7 pounds 2, mother and baby well. And I sent it off, and I thought nothing more of it. And I thought, it'll save me answering calls and texts throughout the day, and people can just like and comment at their leisure, and it'll be fine. So I did that, and then a couple of hours after the baby was born, I was outside and I was sent home to get some stuff or whatever, and I got an email, an alert to my email that said, you have some feedback from your picture. And I checked it, and it was like 22 likes and 17 comments. And I went and trolled through, and I went, oh, it's lovely, it's all very pleasant, you know, lovely name, beautiful daughter, and it was all very nice and made me feel kind of warm inside. And then I went home, and then I got another alert that said there was 36 comments and 52 likes, and I think I missed the first 2 days of my child's life because I was going back and checking and checking and checking. And I was really surprised that as a man in his mid-30s, late mid-30s, I've been in 7 years of personal therapy. I would see myself as a very psychologically well-adjusted individual. I certainly have been through every MOT that can be asked in terms of the mind. But I was absolutely seduced by this phenomena, and I was absolutely interested in how many likes and comments that I got. After about 2 days, it started to plateau, and it finished out, I think, at around 73 likes and 56 comments. And I thought to myself, rock star. Really, Facebook fame has arrived, until I compare it to my teenage patients, who would say that was absolutely lame. 72 likes is like a bad day at the office. But from the point of view of, I got really sucked into it. So then it started to plateau. And then what happened was even more interesting. I started to go on Facebook again, and then I noticed that there were people coming on Facebook who hadn't liked my picture and hadn't commented on my picture. And I started to scroll through and say, hang on, you've seen my picture. You had to have seen it on the newsfeed. You didn't like it. So then my mind went into thinking, I have 120 friends. 70-something likes. Do 48 people think my child is ugly? And I went into this space where I actually got consumed by it and forensically looking through it. And I caught myself, and I was tired, and I was sleep deprived, and I had a new baby, and it was all very interesting. But I thought to myself, this is not good. Imagine this as a 14-year-old girl who's trying to form an identity, whose feedback is way more important than it is to me. If this can happen to me, how does that work for other people? And what happened was I opened up the conversation in my clinical area and in the therapy room to ask about young people's involvement in the online space. And it was one of the turning points of my career, because actually I had only realized then that many of the conversations that I had had where someone would say, I was talking to my friend Mary last night, they mean talking on Facebook, not in face-to-face. So there was a lot of clarification that I had I'd missed the point a lot of the time. But what it also meant was there was a whole heap of anxiety around this mode of communication that makes it really, really difficult to manage. And I'll give you an example, a simple example of a text. If you say to your friend, I can't make the cinema tonight, something's come up, I'm snowed in, and you get a reply, fine. You're left with all the missing pieces of that fine. Is that a fine, that's okay, or fine, I'll never speak to you again, or fine, I'm really annoyed? And so what's missing in the communication leaves us up to ourselves to get paranoid and anxious and stressed about it. And I wondered about young people who have kind of status updating anxiety. And we'll hear things, and I was on a TV program a few weeks ago about online pornography. I've often asked about cyberbullying, these big kind of major league issues that catch headlines. But there's something more constant and an undercurrent to this mode of communication that changes the way, that is changing the way we relate. So the clinical presentation of the kid who's brought to my room for query that she's sexting or sending pornographic images, or a child or teenager who comes across pornography online, a child who's being cyberbullied, a child who's being vilified online through various hate campaigns. That's the thin end of the wedge. There's a far more greater, more constant that I think applies to much more the generic part of our population rather than the narrow few that come to my therapy room. And again, it was only that I noticed it in myself that I began to ask these questions. There's lots of people who've written about this topic and say that yes, the way in which the computer-mediated communication has changed the way we relate to each other. It has changed our relationship with each other, and it has changed our relationships with ourselves. And I want to show you just, I love that cartoon. It says, don't use that font with me, young lady. And what it means in that is that we have created meaning in the size of letters, the types of letters, the emotion, smiley face, winky face. We're trying to humanize the technology to give it more, but not give it everything. And it's that idea around actually being able to cut and paste ourselves that I'm going to talk to you a little bit later on. But the world is made up of two different types of people. There are digital immigrants and digital natives. Many of us in this room are digital immigrants. So that means that we've grown up in a time before the internet. So we know what it was like to go to a travel agent to book a flight, which to many young people today sounds like the most prehistoric thing you'd ever have to do. We remember what it was like to get a letter. We remember doing the love letter and the scented thing on the envelope and all that sort of effort that went into that communication. Digital natives are young people who were born in the kind of late 90s, early 2000s, who've been born into a very internet-heavy environment. And as Irish people, we are massive fans of technology. We consume it nearly more than anybody else in the world. In league tables, we text as much as anyone else, if not more. We're big fans of shortened forms of communication, and we're calling less and less and less. This question of what's being missed is often in the idea that I'd rather take a text than a call. And that came from, I think, young people who've talked to me about that, but also myself. If I take the call, then I have to go through the yes, how are you, grand, yeah, the family are fine, yes, oh, shocking weather, yes, house prices are shocking, yeah, what do you want? Yes, I'll meet you at 3:30. The call, I have to go through all the messiness of communication. The text is, what time? 3:30, done, K, boom, it's over. So it's neater, but I don't have to endure the messiness of what it is to communicate. And sometimes that can be a good thing, but in terms of how we relate to each other, that isn't good. Because young people, again, are growing up who haven't had to sit through the boring story to get to the point. Everything is to the point. So there's no dross and no messiness. The reality is, and as a psychoanalyst, it is the messiness, it's the mistakes that we make that truly reveal who we are. We're never an edited, cut and paste version of ourselves. The reason we have relationships and marriages that work is because you accept the fact that he farts in the bed, or you accept the fact that she leaves the toothpaste open or the toilet seat up. Those flaws are what make people stay in relationships. It's the acceptance of those flaws in each other that make relationships compatible and companionship. If you live in a world where there is no room to make those mistakes and everything is cut and pasted to the perfection or to the edited and drafted version of communication, then we have very little tolerance of each other's mistakes. And we use phrases like, I have to get through these emails, I have to delete all. We think about technology and people in the same breath, which is in a kind of a disposable way. Trim it down. Twitter, X amount of characters. Describe yourself on a Facebook profile in X amount of words. So we have to condense everything down into the minutiae. So we are a tag of who we are. And in terms of the editing, cutting, and pasting of the self, what young people describe in terms of their Facebook profiles is trying to get that perfect picture. I'm not familiar, if you're familiar with the Ice Bucket Challenge, I'm sure you were. It was this campaign for motor neuron disease, I think it was, and basically you threw a bucket of water over yourself and you donated some money. I knew 2 young people who did that 4 times in order to look well when the bucket went over their water. So she didn't like the first 3 times the bucket was thrown over water because her face looked silly or her scream looked stupid. So she did it 4 times, 4 buckets of water over her head in order for people not to see her look unpretty. And that level of perfectionism is something that I see in adolescence today that is far different. I'm working in child psychiatry for 18 years. In the last 5 to 10, the level of perfectionism that young people come with has risen. The 400 points in your leaving was a brilliant leaving 10 years ago. Now it's 500 and it's 550 and expectations are getting higher and higher and higher. And there's no room for messiness or mistakes, which causes us to kind of drive into this kind of very neat, very packaged, unmessy relationship with each other. And in terms of adolescence, regulation is the key of adolescence. It's about, you don't leave a 12-year-old with an open fridge full of ice cream because they'll eat till they're sick. They don't know when to stop. You know, kids who are on a sleepover don't go, lads, it's 2 o'clock, we really should go to bed because, you know, we've got a busy day tomorrow. They'll stay up till 5 and be horrendously cranky all day Saturday. The regulation task is something you learn as you go through childhood and adolescence into adulthood. The internet and technology doesn't encourage any form of regulation because we can't regulate it. It is the greatest social experiment of our time that we have introduced into society without any knowledge of the outcome. We just said, here's this thing that makes you do almost anything, and we can't really stop anything going up. We can only take it down after it's up. But see how you go. I hope it's all right. And it's kind of been that way in some respects, in the way in which we've managed it. But again, as a digital immigrant, we know the trick behind the magic. If you ever see a magician do a trick and you know how he's done it, it never looks the same again because you can see the trick behind the magic. If you're a digital native, you're not entirely sure of that trick behind the magic. You just become seduced into what it is because it's there. And what's the key to the way in which the internet and technology is moving, it's moving into a humanization of technology. So we're trying to make technology more interactive, more caring, more human. And the Facebook example is brilliant. Facebook used to be, where are you, what are you thinking, what's on your mind. Now it's what are you feeling. So they want you to disclose how you feel all the time in your statuses. I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm blessed, I'm angry, I'm whatever. And that disclosure makes you interesting. So it makes people stay online, it makes people keep online, but it's encouraging us to disclose ourselves and disclose more about ourselves in a time where we don't feel terribly regulated. That image is really interesting. That's what an iPhone would look like if we'd have built one in the 90s. You would need that level of technology. It's now that size. We have moved an incredible amount of space in a very short time. And in fact, the reality is, prior to 2009, we wouldn't have really known what an iPhone was. Prior to 2002, I think it was, we weren't entirely sure, we weren't altogether familiar with Google. Now it's part of our discourse. If I'd have said to somebody last week, I Googled your thing last night, I could be arrested. Now it's absolutely accepted. So it's come into part, it's woven into the technology, has woven into the fabric of our lives rather seamlessly, but really, really quickly. 2009 is not a long time ago, where iPhones and iPads didn't exist. Now, people have multiple devices within the home. I used to give examples when I was on radio shows or any sort of parent evenings. Keep the PC in the sitting room and you'll be grand. That's no longer ever, that's absolutely, because there's about 7 portals per Irish home of which the internet has access to your children and your home. Like the Xbox, the Wii, the tablet, the iPhones, dad's iPhone, mom's iPhone, and the PC as well. So it becomes a much more difficult thing to surveil. So this humanization of technology, how is that happening? In the States, they're now trialing robotic carers. So in nursing homes, they have these SEALs who will sit beside elderly people and ask them how they're doing. And the elderly person will say how sad they feel or happy they feel or whatever's going on in their lives. And the SEAL is programmed to respond and say, that sounds terrible, Mary. Sure, you'll get through it and all this sort of stuff. So they're replacing people in care environments with robotic, not even human forms, but animals. The best example is there's also your Siri on your iPhone where you talk to it, and it's really has taken off much more in the States than it has here. So you say, Colman, call Agnes, and it'll call, and so Siri goes, I can't find Agnes, Agnes might be there, and gives you a kind of response. So it's to mimic a relationship between you and the device. The best example of that is your sat-nav. People have relationships with their sat-navs. People get frustrated with their sat-nav. They get angry with their sat-nav. They praise their sat-nav. They bless their sat-nav. They even name their sat-nav. My friend calls his Bridie, and he thanks her every time he gets somewhere. And it's creating a relationship with technology. The sat-nav isn't Bridie. Bridie isn't there. You know, it's like my mother when she was on the tube for the first time. And when they used to say the next stop is Camden Station, my mum said, that must be a very boring job. I said, Ma'am, that's recorded. There's not somebody standing at the top of the train saying, next stop, next stop. But in the way that technology comes into our lives, it's in a very, we develop relationships with it. An example of that would be you go on Amazon and you buy the Leinster rugby mug on Amazon. The next time you go on Amazon, it says, hi, Colman, welcome back. Would you like a Leinster scarf, a Leinster pair of socks, a Leinster DVD? And I'm going, Amazon knows I like Leinster. Amazon likes me. Amazon wants me to buy this. Amazon cares about me. Amazon doesn't care about you at all. It's about data gathering. And it's about how the internet gathers data to give it back to you to form a relationship. And that relationship is quite successful, and it's one that we oftentimes are seduced into. I think back to the children of today who are growing up in these devices that are about relationships. Talking teddy bears. My daughter has a teddy bear. I go online, I follow this pin code, I put in her name, her favorite songs, and her age. And every night I squeeze the foot of that teddy bear, it goes, good night, Layla, here's 5 of your favorite bedtime music songs, and plays the songs. So at 2 years of age, she's going, Teddy's here, Teddy's reliable, Teddy talks to me, Teddy cares about me. The idea of self-reading books. Have you seen these? These are books that you can get for your child, and you open it, and you press record, and you read the story, and it records the story, so that when your child is there, they can open the book, and your voice comes out on each page, and as they turn the page, it reads out the story to them. My sister bought this for my son, and at first I thought, that's really nice. Then I thought, actually, that's bloody tragic. Because I know my son, the story is the least important part of that interaction. When I get home at night and I'm lying in there with my son, it's about the cuddles, it's about the snuggles, about the time. He's not even listening to the story. But if I think I can give him this book and he'll hear my voice, it'll be like I'm there, and I can be down in the kitchen answering some work emails, then that's a fairly tragic outcome to a technological advance. And my interest is in what are we missing? What is being missed and skipped by convenience? Which brings us on to that idea of the on-demand culture. And we live in a very on-demand culture, and I borrow that term from my digital television device, Sky On Demand, which has saved my life. I love my Sky Plus. My Sky Plus and my iPhone, 2 favorite things in the world. But I was watching the World Cup last summer. I was watching a game live, which would be really unusual. It was Brazil and Germany, I think, or something. But it came to the ads. And I was terribly frustrated. I was trying to fast forward it and going, oh, you have to sit through this. And I thought, actually, Colman, cop on, get a life. But there's an idea of this on-demand happiness, that we don't have to wait for something. You don't have to spend any time. There's no delay. We don't have to delay gratification. Then I always record movies for my children on Sky Movies. So there's no breaks in that. It just goes straight through, and they watch it at their leisure. I recorded something off RTE about 3 months ago. And I showed it to my son, and I was in the kitchen washing up or doing something functional. And he came running in and said, Daddy, Daddy, the telly's broken. And I went inside, and there was an ad on. And I was saying, son, that's an ad. It's a what? I said, it's an ad. They advertise things in between, but where's the thing? I said, it'll be back in a minute. And his face was like the indignancy of this contraption. Who do they think they are? And I was going, oh my God, I'm rearing a diva. He was the most, it's foot tapping, this ad thing, I don't get it and I don't want to change it. And I'm going, well, you can't really change it, it's there. And then I was kind of getting into a ridiculous conversation. But it made me think about that speed and convenience doesn't teach somebody how to wait. And we always use that expression, you have to learn to wait. It's not an innate skill. It's something you develop over time, the ability to wait, to delay gratification. There was a marshmallow test done years ago in the 70s where they gave these children a marshmallow and they put it in front of them. And they said they were about between the ages of 3 and 6. And they said, if you don't eat the marshmallow for 15 minutes, you get 2. But if you do eat it, you just get the 1. And they tested those kids and followed them through the 70s and 80s. And the results showed that those who had the ability to delay gratification did far better educationally, personally, psychologically, and obviously BMI as well. But from the point of view of there was a sense that this delaying gratification in childhood was really important. It was an important aspect to development of yourself and your own self-control. In an on-demand society, we're not even allowing a space for somebody to learn to wait. If my kid says, I want a game, I can just download it and go. I don't say, well, we'll go on Saturday. And I don't have the leverage of, you won't get that game. That was the really unique thing about Santi. I couldn't bring him forward. So I had a whole month of, Santi's watching you, don't do that or Santi's not going to come. And it was brilliant, because I had an external other who was getting in trouble for being a parent than I was. But the idea that in most cases, there isn't a capacity to wait. There's that joke, and that's the same for adults. The joke where someone's doing their driving test and the driving instructor says, what's a red light for? And the girl says, checking my Facebook, tweeting, and, you know, so even in that moment that I'm stopped for a second, I'm in my device. There is no space for boredom and no space for aloneness. Next time you're in Lidl and there's a queue, watch it. Everyone's there. There's 2 minutes going to be every doctor's waiting room, every bus stop. We go into the device, we escape into something entertaining rather than sitting and having a sense of aloneness. And Sherry Turkle, who's a psychoanalyst in MIT, speaks a lot about this inability to be alone. That it's actually when we're alone that we work out who we are. We work out how we feel about things, how we think about things. And in society now where there isn't that space to be alone, there's no room for reflection or self-reflection. And that increase in demand means that we have an increase in unhappiness. So the idea that I was in McDonald's a few weeks ago and I saw this woman giving out that the Wi-Fi didn't work. It's not that long ago when we sat in front of these things watching this blue thing go, remember dial-up? We were happy with that then because we were going to get online. Now, if the Wi-Fi is slow, we're irate. There's stories of people having to come home from their family trip to France because their teenage daughter has become unbearable because there's no Wi-Fi on the campsite. And it's become something that has driven people into a frenzy that I need to be always on, and I need to be on demand, and things need to be on demand for me. And again, I draw the distinction between the digital native and the digital immigrant, but I think we're all we all can fall foul to that. The other aspects of online that are interesting is recognition. That being recognized, being seen. And so the selfie, if people are aware, the selfie went into the Oxford English Dictionary, is a wonderful example of recognition. It's an imitation of something spontaneous, of which I took 7 of the shots before I got the right one. So it's imitating spontaneity, but it's actually not. But it's about me having a recognition and being recognized. And for young people, when I got new trainers or new sweater or something, I was really excited about it, but it was always the acid test was how it was going to go down out there. So Mum would buy me the thing and I'd say, it's fine, yeah, it's grand. Then I'd go out and people go, love that, it's deadly. I'd come home and say, thanks, Mum, it's awesome. But I would delay the agreement until I had researched it and had the majority of people voting in favor of this top, and therefore it was okay to wear. And that was the result of many fashion faux pas through the 80s and 90s. But the idea behind it was recognition was important, and it forms who I am. I'm a product of my experiences, and I'm also a product of the feedback that I have received throughout my life. The things about me that people like, I continue to do. Perhaps the things that people don't like about me, I hide or I remove from myself. So this idea of being recognized and recognition is central to it. So the idea behind my status update was those likes were recognition. And I think I was popular when I was in secondary school, but I didn't know. There was no ledger on the wall that said Colman has these many friends, John has these many. Now there is. So it's not only, I can't even be delusional in myself that I'm popular when I'm not, because there's an external measurement. There was a thing on Bebo when it came out first, if people remember Bebo, where you name your top 15 friends, and there's only room for 15. The ructions that caused, oh, I'm not in her 15, she's out of mine, and there was swapping and changing, and it caused incredible amounts of turmoil and drama within the teenage world. And the idea that I will need, if I have 1,000 friends, then I'm cool. If I have 1,500, I'm very cool. If I have less than 500, I shouldn't exist. And there's this sense that we need to just create a kind of a social currency to define our worth. And that selfie and recognition comes into recognition and validation. The other thing is the feeling and response that it creates. Before, if I had a feeling, I would share it. So if I broke up with my girlfriend and I was upset, I phoned my friend and I said I'm upset. I had a feeling and I share it. The theory now is I need a feeling, so I share. So I say, look what I just cooked, this fabulous lasagna. Put it out there. And then you'll all come back going, you're such a genius in the oven. Oh, well done, hon, you're amazing. XXS, LOL, get a life. And I'll get all the feedback. And then I'll know that I have something. But it's being devoid of a feeling that makes me do it, rather than having a feeling that I need to share. Does that make sense? And what we're also getting kind of the share is really interesting. Again, I see people going to concerts, and there's your favorite artist, it's Ed Sheeran or the Rolling Stones, wherever it is, and you're watching them, and they're there in front of you singing your favorite song. And you're watching it through that, a 6-inch screen. You're not experiencing it, you're watching it through this, because it's more important to capture the fact that I was there than to be there. And that need to share is taking away from the meaning of the experience, because I'm more involved in the recognition, the validation, than being in the event. And so this idea of meaning, Sherry Turkle talked about, she took these kids to a dinosaur museum, and there was this wonderful fossil, this massive T-Rex, and they had put it together for ages. The tour guide kind of gave a history as to what it was and how important it was. And the kids said, oh, it's really good. And they said, it would be better if it moved. So the meaning was not in the historical significance of the thing, but its capacity to interact. And if we get consumed in the capacity to interact, then we automatically dilute meaning, and that's a real worry. The internet is not a bad thing. It's a social snack. And in the same way that McDonald's is used with children in a healthy way, that you go once a week or you go twice, it's there as a treat. It's something to complement what you do in your normal life. And internet technology is the same. It is something there to complement face-to-face interaction, not supplement it. And where it runs into problems is where somebody supplements face-to-face interaction for the social snacking. Because you get the sugary high, but you get a very quick come down. News stories, the stats on that, and following Twitter and things like that, like if they hit social media, they go orbital. So the Je suis Charlie and the water charges and any sort of crises, it goes viral and it's there. But its shelf life is much, much less than it normally would. So a news story that may have lasted 7 days before lasts 3 days on social media. So it's that sugar rush hit that we get all exercised about, and then it's forgotten because there's so much coming at us that it doesn't have a sustainable effect on how we feel or how we interact. And again, that is an effect on relationships. I'm really interested in iPhone envy, which is, we talk about sibling rivalry and all that sort of stuff. When you're born, I have a real interest in newborns and children, and I find myself doing this, feeding my child, checking this, swinging a child on a swing, checking my phone. The idea that if I'm doing that, I'm sending a message to that baby that this is more important than you. So I shouldn't be surprised when my 1.5-year-old goes, can I have your phone, can I have your phone, can I have your phone? I've created the mystique by doing and role modeling my own intrigue into the device. Of course a child is going to follow suit and go, there must be something freaking awesome in that thing that he spends that much time in it. I want some of that. And so we're kind of creating and not role modeling an ability to moderate ourselves even as adults. And the internet is like a city, and again, this is borrowed from Stephen Fry. You wouldn't go into a city without some sort of a guide map, but sometimes we send children and young people out there without any sense of where it is. And the internet's really good. There's some really awesome museums in some cities, and there's some really nice picturesque buildings, but there's also some seedy red light spots as well. And if you don't know where you're going, you have a good chance that you'll end up in some of those places too. So the idea of regulation is an issue. FOMO is a new phenomenon created in the States. It's called fear of missing out, which is the incidence of young people setting their phones every 2 hours throughout the night in order to wake up, check social media to see if there's something has happened that they've missed. The amount of sleep deprivation that we're suffering in Irish schools today, because of that, their phone is not regulated. It's not taken from you, so you have it 24/7. And what I'd say to you is, in the same way that a copybook ceases to become a copybook when you create a diary in it, a phone ceases to be a phone when you create an emotional relationship with it. I have pictures of my children, I have my innermost thoughts, I have that song that I wrote when I was on that bus that time that I'll never release. Everything emotional is in this device. So it no longer is just a thing for texting and making calls. I have an emotional relationship with it. So if I lose it, or if it's taken from me, or I forget it, then it's going to cause a problem. There's a recent thing called phantom vibration syndrome, which is another thing. These are the eye disorders where people are constantly checking their pockets because they think something has gone off in their pockets, like their phone, when it's not actually happened. People are laughing because I know you're all suffering from it. The idea is, there's another issue. Nokia did a study. The average person checks their phone 150 times a day. Average. The average people check their phone, and they were doing where people do it. 39% of people check their phone or use their phone on the toilet. 4 out of 10 people, and I hear you, but you all do it. In a sense, the other fear is sexualization. Again, the non-regulation of that, the cyberbullying scandals, and the viral scandals. Think of the Slane girl. You know, that kid who made a mistake, whatever she was, 15-year-old girl, found herself in a sexually compromised position. It was recorded and went viral all over the world. And it's the same, the desire to do things is no different, but the potential impact of the internet is much, much more different. And again, we have a lot of worries about all of those things. So what's the answer? And the answer is to educate young people on the use of the internet. And that's not a secondary school phenomenon. It's not, you don't bring that in when a kid is 15 in transition year and go, I'm going to talk to you about the internet. They could teach you about the internet at that stage. And you know, this idea that, you know, I've asked lots of parents, do you have a parental control on your devices at home? Yes. Danny did it. Danny is the 15-year-old who put the parental control on the devices at home. And the education is three-pronged. It's in professionals. Every professional who deals with children and adolescents needs to know about this space. It's not good enough to say, I'm not interested in that face tube. It's not for me. You need to know. If your child is on that space, you need to know where that is. The idea that we educate the young people about the digital line. Where is enough? Because if there's no regulation there, it's gone past the idea of a half an hour a day. The study done on Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and all those people, they looked at their children's use of the internet. I thought, Steve Jobs' home is going to be tiled with iPads, and it's going to be amazing. Half an hour every 2 days. That's what his children were allowed. These guys make these devices. They know something that we don't. And here's me handing an iPod to a child on a 3-hour journey to play Minion Rush or whatever it is. And the idea is that we need to educate ourselves, educate the young people, and educate professionals who are involved in it. We need to create a sense of resilience, because children are going to need to be strong and resilient in that space. Because the fact of the matter is, when your child is going to be faced with some challenge, chances are you're not going to be there. And that's an important thing to remember. You have to instill a sense of you in them, rather than a demand that you be there all the time. And that's a really important lesson, I think, for most of us to learn. But most importantly, it's about developing a sense of cop-on, which is the most underestimated, undervalued Irish wonderful parochial skill in the world. It's a demand, cop-on. It's a quality, loads of cop-on. It's a bad thing, not a bit of cop-on. What is it? It's being able to make judgments, contextualize, have a sense of yourself. It's a wonderful quality. People say to me, oh, you're a child psychotherapist, your kids are going to be perfect. I dread the fact that they're probably all going to have blue hair and nose rings. But the reality is, if someone says to me, you know what it is like to be out there, what would you want your child to be? And I don't care if they're clever, I don't care if they're sporty, I don't care on any level. If they have cop on, that'll do me. And it's a real sense of something that we need to do. And I'll just show you some of the challenges, and I'm going to leave you on this. This is the iPotty, which is basically brought out in the States last year, which is an iPod device to toilet train your child whilst using the iPad. It sold close on 350,000 units, I think, in the first 3 weeks, and is still selling today. So let's look at what we need to do. Let's try and change it. But come here, I don't have the answers. But I do have a worry, and I do have a concern. And if that's something that you take home from tonight, well, then I'm happy. So thank you. I work in a psychiatric inpatient unit, so I'm familiar with this discussion because there is debate you shouldn't have any online outside connection at all, and some units will take that view. Other units will, like ours, will say you need to have it there because you're not protecting young people by leaving it, because they'll leave on Saturday or Sunday and just go on the iPhone. And this is in situations where people are compass mentis and can make those calls. If someone's acutely unwell and is making seriously compromised decisions, then the people around them need to step in and manage them in many ways. And that's about their spending, it's about where they go, it's about lots of other things. And the internet use should be no different. But in the case of where prohibition of the internet, and that is the one thing that parents say, right, that's it. They're not getting a Facebook till they're 20, they're not getting an iPhone until they're 50, and then we'll have it all sorted. Prohibition doesn't work because yes, of course. I mean, that's a very specialized question that you're asking. In general terms, by stopping someone because you think you're protecting them doesn't actually allow that child to learn any skills of negotiation. And oftentimes children who come into the internet late, it's like if you've never had a McDonald's till you're 15, you know, you're in there and going, oh, I love this thing. And it's about introducing it in a safe way. And a big question that parents ask me, and I'm distracting from your question, not because I'm trying to avoid it, but I think in your situation, that girls should have been managed much more closely around that, in the same way that she would have been managed around other areas of her life. I don't think it's necessarily specific about spending money, who she mixes with, all that sort of stuff. In the cases of supervision for children, I think you start early in high levels of supervision and you step back as they exercise an ability to be online. So you are a friend of theirs, but you'll come back as they show that they're being sensible. And people say, what age should I be able to give my child Facebook? What age should I give them a phone? What age should I give that? Age is absolutely arbitrary in adolescence. I know 12-year-olds who I would give internet access to, fine, because they'll just go on Minecraft and they'll absolutely fine. If they come across anything seedy, they'll have no interest in it and they'll find a way out. There are 17-year-olds out there who I'd be petrified to give unsupervised access to the internet because they don't have that sense. And again, that comes back to that idea of cop on. And again, there are things like our illnesses and our life events that temporarily mean that we lose our sense of being able to prioritize and contextualize. If that's the case, the internet in your hand's not a really good thing to do, and people around you need to step in and mind you in that situation. We have a whitelist, which is basically there's a list of sites that they can access, but it's not like they can't get around it, so they're very high. It's constantly monitored, so any misuse of it is reported and they lose it for a day or two. So it's about trying to encourage them to be sensible around it. But we tried having no access. We saw them on Friday and they'd say, I'm just going home with mom and dad, and the iPhone will be out and they're there. So from Monday to Friday, you're not teaching any skills, you're just taking an ostrich approach that this doesn't exist and saying it's not on my watch. The number one reason why children don't report cyberbullying is because they know that their parents' first response is plug out the computer. You're no Facebook for you. You're not going to, and they are petrified of that more than they are of oftentimes the bullying continuing. At least I'm on Facebook and see what's happening. The worst thing you can do is remove that from me. And it's about not resorting to prohibition as an answer, but trying to promote an internal skill for somebody to help them to manage it, regardless of the challenges that are out there, because you can't prohibit forever. That's the issue. In a sense, though, the person that you're talking about, in that case, we would say to parents, you need to give permission for your child to be online. Many parents don't. Yes, but in that case, then siblings and people who are around her need to say, look, this is not good for you. We need to step in and help you to manage that. And staff and the team around her may indeed need to do that as well. But again, that's a kind of a contentious issue that I'm not so sure. I don't work in adult psychiatry, so I don't know how they would manage it. But in our situation, we manage it very closely and very carefully, especially if someone is compromised from the decision-making point of view. But I don't side on the side of prohibition, because I don't know whether that works. Temporarily prohibiting someone who's very unwell, possibly, but not in the longer term. And again, research can only give a response to the people they ask the question to. So, but in terms of are you a digital immigrant or a native? I would think you're a bit of both. The issue around books and people say, is this the same as the television? A lot of that is passive. You're passively watching TV. Internet is engaging, and you're going in places and you're meeting people on the other side, meeting actual people, perpetrators, predators, sexual predators, people who are guiding you through various sense of sending pictures of yourself. There's an Omegle site, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. Many, many Irish children find their way into that. It's horrendous what's happening on that. No way a book or television can do that. If we leave your child in a room with the television on, you have a good sense of back when I was there in the 80s, we had to wait until Sunday to watch a music video. I'm not saying that that's not an issue now, where MTV is 24 hours and you can see all kind of sexualized imagery for any age group at any time in the day. But the worry about the internet is that it's interactive and there's an engagement with it and a relationship that is mutually interactive in that way, rather than it being passive. And I think that's the quality that makes it different to De Valera's warning of the TV and what it was going to do to Irish society in that way. Do you know what I mean? I take your challenge of the Nokia research for sure, but I think 150 times a day is probably pretty accurate if we counted our own. Yeah, I mean, I was speaking with somebody recently who's a Saval Oz, and she's involved in the self-drive car. And they are convinced that in the next 10 years we will actually have self-drive cars. Because the internet's all about connectivity. So it'll be about being able to plan the route, it'll bring you where it is, it's about knowing where the traffic is, bringing you the best way to work. My question to her was, what happens when that goes wrong? What happens when you can't get out of your car and you're heading for a cliff or whatever it is? Like, when do we rely on technology? It's fine when it works, but when it doesn't work, it's a real worry. And I don't have the answer to that, but I certainly share your concern with it, for sure. Yeah, I think I worry about, and the concept is called alone together. So we're all together, but we're all in our devices. So we're alone, but we're not really alone. We have no capacity for gratification. I would worry about what I'm seeing already is high levels of perfectionism, really intolerant relationships. Anything that goes slightly wrong, you're out of my life forever. A high level of cut and paste, wanting you to be perfect. The idea of the internet relationship, so people who meet online and have an online relationship, that's all about control. I'm available to you when I'm online. I would love when my wife asks me to bring the bins out and I'm watching the rugby to just go offline, but I can't, because I can't do that. I need to be there, and that means that relationship is real. But the artificial circumstances which this technology is creating in terms of relationships means that there's traditional skills and qualities of interaction, of tolerance, of perseverance, of grit, of resilience that are being questioned. And they're the things that I would worry most about from the point of view of the young people growing up. People say, we're not seeing that in terms of the iPhone. The iPhone is only out since, say, 2009, 2010 in Ireland. So the children who are born into that are still only 5 or 6. We haven't seen these children in teenage years, adulthood yet, so we don't really know. But my worry is that we need to actually be careful of how we introduce this into our world, because there are things being missed in the way it's been done in such a quick and rapid way. Yeah, I think it's a choice and a seduction in terms of that. I don't know whether my area of interest is in children, because I'm not so sure they're making informed choices, because oftentimes we as adults make make choices for them. So if we decide on a digital babysitter by giving you an iPad, that's not you making a choice, but by the time you're 9 and you're interwoven into that technology, that choice has been made for you. As adults and immigrants, yes, I think we have a choice. We have a choice to engage or disengage in it, and it is ubiquitous. It is everywhere from that point of view. But in terms of my study, and I was being quite fickle about the idea that why does somebody share a picture of their lasagna? The core reason behind my research is I'm trying to identify people who are predisposed or vulnerable to this technology, who will, so identify characteristics of people that will make them actually go to those places where they can't regulate how they engage with it and lose themselves in it, and identify those people who don't, who have a capacity to know when is enough.
I'm sorry, we have to draw to an end because we have run out of time. I'm sure there's loads of questions. It was fascinating, really fascinating, and I would just like to say, Molly, thank you so much for sharing your
Could I
study
just
with
make
us.
one plug?
Yes?
Yeah. I do have a book coming out on the 6th of March. It'll be available in your shops on ebook, and it's called Cop On, Why We Need It to Thrive and Survive in Today's World. So if you want it, buy it. It's a lot of that stuff and more in it. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.